crabs. Dark Souls. A match made in heaven, right? This year, one little indie game has taken the internet by storm, and something about it smells fishy. I've been a rather big fan of Dark Souls, and the emerging genre of Souls-likes. I've played all of From Software's Souls games from the OG Demon Souls on the PlayStation 3, and the more recent Elden Ring. I've even played all the knockoffs from Code Vein to Lies of P, and even the Surge series. I don't know if it's a mental illness or some sort of video game domination kink where I have to play these really hard action RPGs, but I just can't get enough of them. So when I saw early gameplay footage and the trailers for Another Crab's Treasure, I was immediately hooked. Heh, get it? So I want to crack open this little indie game and grab one of those little forks and dig into Another Crab's Treasure. Another Crab's Treasure was released in April of 2024 on Xbox, PlayStation 4 and 5, PC, and Switch. The game was developed by Aggro Crab Games, a small indie studio based out of Seattle, Washington. The studio has one other game under its belt, which is a fun little roguelike, Going Under, which is a fun dungeon crawling romp, and an exploration of how our labor is exploited in this cold, uncaring capitalist system. That internships might be some of the worst exploitation under this system, because companies are profiting off your labor and you're not even getting paid for your time and work. Oh sorry, I was almost starting to get political there for a second, but don't worry, politics and crabs don't mix. Just ignore that venture capitalist over there, and any commentary about pollution in the ocean. Another Crab's Treasure is an action RPG in the vein of Dark Souls, which has spawned a litany of copycats over the ages, that range wildly in quality. And before we get any further, I can say that, yes, Another Crab's Treasure is definitely one of the better Souls-like games out there. And it's not because what it apes from the Souls series, it's what it does wildly differently. While the gameplay is very reminiscent of Dark Souls, it takes and changes so many aspects that Another Crab's Treasure feels wholly unique, which is something I really can't even say about some of the best Souls games out there like Lies of P. While you get the standard lock-on, light, heavy attack, block, parry, dodge roll, like many a Dark Souls, Another Crab's Treasure adds many more mechanics on top of that tried and true Dark Souls formula in a really unique way. First off, there's no stamina bar, so in theory you can dodge and attack with impunity, not that it really helps much. There's the big main mechanic of the shells that Krill can utilize. These shells work as temporary shields with their own health bar, and all with varying levels of weight and defense, and each having their own unique shell spell. These spells are unique to each shell. The soda can fire bubbles at enemies, the ice cream cone can freeze nearby enemies in an AoE attack, or my personal favorite, the occult, which applies a health regen for a short time. These spells use a resource called Umami, which is a rechargeable resource that you build up by whacking enemies with your fork. Umami can also be used to cast adaptations, which are spells that you attain by defeating certain bosses. Some of these adaptations are used for environmental puzzles, but I mostly use the gun. There's a posture meter akin to Sekiro, where you can stance break enemies and leave them open for a combo. There's a skill tree that unlocks early on in the game when you meet the Moon Snail, the original Crystal Girly. By trading in the purple crystals you gain through exploration and defeating bosses, you unlock skills like parrying, counterattacks, or a finishing move on stance broken enemies. There's way more, like being able to turn your shell into a heavy hammer type weapon by stabbing it with your fork, or giving your shell a Bloodborne type regen system. By staying aggressive in a fight, you can keep your shell health up. You can also trade these purple crystals with the Mantis Shrimp to upgrade your adaptations, which he's locked away in an optional area that my dumbass almost entirely missed. By the end of my playthrough, I actually unlocked everything in the skill tree and maxed out more than half of my adaptations, and I know I missed quite a few crystals in my playthrough, so if you're thorough enough, I'm sure you'll probably be maxed out by the time you'll hit the credits. There's also the typical Souls-like leveling system, where you collect microplastics from defeated enemies, this game's soul equivalent, used as both a currency and experience points that you spend to level up. You only have 4 different stats to level into: Vitality, which is your hit points, Attack, which is self-explanatory, resistance, which is your defense and elemental resistances, and umami, which is your magic stat, which boosts the attack power of your shell spells and adaptations. You drop your microplastics and shell on death, and then you have to run back to where you died to retrieve them, aka the typical Souls corpse run. But there's another layer of gameplay beyond the combat. This game pulls double duty as a platformer. To be honest, the platforming is pretty straightforward. You get a jump, a little glide, swimming when you're underwater, which becomes unavailable while you're on dry land, because you're swimming, duh. You get a little grappling hook, fishing hook, which is used to bridge large gaps or latch onto a net, and even get some combat use if you unlock the right skills. There are some puzzle elements occasionally dotted in, like rolling downhill in your shell, but you only really use it once or twice through the whole game, so the platforming is pretty straightforward, but that's not a complaint at all. I feel like it helped break up the pacing a little bit, added a little extra spice while exploring the sands between. Do you get it? It's almost like the lands between in Elden Ring. I also found the difficulty to be much lower than your typical Souls-like. Don't get me wrong, I still died and found a few of the bosses to be a bit difficult, but I am a Souls veteran, so of course, I didn't have any trouble beating this game. There is also a litany of accessibility options to make the game easier so you can still experience everything the game has to offer. My personal favorite was to give Kryll a gun, where you can one-shot every enemy in the game, which I never used once. What? I do honestly think that these accessibility options are a great addition, while I really didn't use them, minus that one time. I think it's great for someone who wants to dip their toes into the Souls tide pool. And there's still so much more to this game, especially when it comes to its art and its story. I found the art style of Another Crab's Treasure to be absolutely wonderful. It's cartoony and bright, well, until it's not, and from the art to the music, it's just exuding fun. I'm honestly starting to get tired of these sad, dying worlds that we're rummaging through in Souls games. Even in the not From Software Souls-like games like Surge or Thymesia, it's always a dark, dying world that doesn't really have any joy or hope in it. It's nice to finally play something that feels like someone, somewhere in this world is having a little bit of fun. Don't get me wrong, just like any Dark Soul, the ocean in Another Crab's Treasure is a dying world that is trying to stay afloat while dealing with an infection from the severe pollution, which is compounded upon due to the trash economy this sea society is using, killing it from the inside out. But this world tries to keep a smiling face and some decorum. Almost feels familiar somehow. Anyway, the locations you visit run the gambit from bustling cities to polluted villages, serene tide pools, and even the sea ruins from past crustacean civilizations, where the denizens are shambling and bleached. These locations all feel lived in and believable within the world, and even tell a bit of a story of its own, like the city of New Carcinia, a bright and bustling city with fancy shops and even a museum placed in the upper crust. The upper crust of New Carcinia is where the rich live, so you can imagine going down to the lower crust is where the dirty poors live. There is a bit of a sketchy element once you go down there, but for the most part it's just good people trying to get by. Even some of the people down there trying their best to feed and clothe the less fortunate. I really enjoy how this game can have these deeper themes while never really breaking from its fun cartoony aesthetic. It actually uses that aesthetic to help enforce the themes, like the homes in the upper crust being made out of nicer trash like glass bottles, and the lower crust live in flimsy cardboard, or how the area of Slacktide becomes desaturated once it gets gunked and the inhabitants lose their mind. It looks cute, it's straightforward, but it never loses its cartoony, fun charm. I found how Another Crab's Treasure told its story to be wildly refreshing compared to the other run-of-the-mill Souls-like games. Unlike your typical Souls-like game, where you play as a nameless, faceless dude scrounging through your dying world, in Another Crab's Treasure you actually play a real character with his own wants and motivations. Meet Kryll, a little hermit crab who's just vibing in his tide pool until one fateful day, the tax man comes a-knocking. And just like many people once they enter the real world, Kryll knows nothing about taxes. His precious shell gets repossessed to cover his back taxes. Now our shy and scared little Kryll shoves off into the deep blue sea in search of his shell. I'm surprised how playing a real character with his own motivations, personality, is a real breath of fresh air compared to the nameless, faceless, creative character I've slayed many a god with in Elden Ring or Dark Soul. And Kryll's not the only one with a personality. This world is chock full of characters, both friendly and otherwise. From the town guard you meet early in the game, who becomes this armored fighter on a quest for strength, to the cute, sweet crab girl who leaves her kids behind to man her shop, so she can search for the treasure and the title's namesake. Not just to improve her and her kids' lives, but hopefully improve the lives of everyone in the lower crust of the city. Krill even finds a sort of rival in the character of Firth, a greedy and shellfish little hermit, and someone who wants to use the system for his own gain, while Krill often fights against the status quo. When you go through Roland's factories, they both see and acknowledge how the workers under Roland are being overworked and abused, but they both come out with differing viewpoints on Roland and the system as a whole. Firth comes out thinking that he was always looking out for the little guy, but just sorta lost the plot somewhere. As Krill rightfully sees that this is the system working as intended, that Roland has and always will be a monster exploiting the people under him. Krill learns and grows from his interactions with these characters and starts to question his original motivation of searching for this treasure to trade for a shell as something possibly selfish. While going through his journey, he discovers he actually has both the power and courage to help the people around him, and even make the ocean a better place. I even found Krill's story a bit moving by the end. The finale, that I'm not going to spoil here, actually pulled on my heartstrings a little bit. Maybe because I have a little bit of shonen anime brain rot, but seeing the nice boy try hard and beat the big bad at the end of the day always gets me a little teary-eyed. And Krill did bring one manly tear to my eye by the end of the game. I really hope this isn't the last time we see Krill in the gang, because I want to see more from this setting and these characters. Now that I've spent the past however long gushing about this game, it's time for me to file my complaints. Which honestly are really just minor nitpicks. I honestly think this game is a tad bit bloated. Like the aforementioned Elden Ring. I just think this game is a little bit too long and a little bit too big for its own good. My playthrough ended up being around 25 hours, and while I got a lot for what I paid for, I think you could have probably shaved off a nice 10 to 20% of the game, and it would have just felt like a tighter experience overall. The animation for the finisher is a bit stiff, and the camera can be a little chaotic and it's easy to get discombobulated at times. And my biggest complaint of all is you can't move the map around. It's just a static PNG that you can't scroll through and plot your path, and that last complaint is going to be addressed in a future patch for the game, which that patch has already hit the PC version of the game. Oh my god! But as of writing this, still hasn't hit the consoles, but will hopefully be fixed soon. These were the only complaints I could really dredge out of the deep. This game is fantastic, and even if you only have a passing interest in Souls-likes, you should check it out. It's a fun bright spot in the typically dark and dour genre, that also made itself accessible without losing what I think makes the genre interesting, which is the sense of place, the exploration, and the catharsis of beating a boss that's been whipping your ass for the past couple hours. The setting of the ocean feels great and lived in and has a story and lore that doesn't need a YouTube cottage industry for you to understand what's going on. The exploration and platforming are extremely fun, and I've never felt better after a boss fight when I shot that goddamn crab in his face. This game is an easy recommendation, and seeing this game's success has made me really happy that this little team was able to accomplish all of this. Thank you so much for watching. I've been chipping away at this video for a while now. If you like this video and want to see more, hit like, subscribe, maybe even click that bell so you won't miss any future uploads. Thank you again for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.